Hello and welcome to my iodine clock reaction. My name is Peyton Bean and let's get started. So first we have our supplies, and I also want to say that I embedded another video that didn't actually take a video of what I was doing, so I went ahead and did all of this, but we're going to go through just a little bit at a time what I did and talk about the final production or the final reaction. So for our first supplies, we have a bunch of beakers. I went ahead and did that in the last video, which I'll also link, but I have a bunch of beakers with some milliliters on them so that I could get exact and precise measurements. So beakers, containers, of course a filter, we did iodine. Now I couldn't find 5% or 2%, so I did iodine 10%, and I'll kind of go through, when I go through the measurements, what I did to kind of offset that. But yeah, so that's for that. And then, of course, vitamin C tablets, which I could only find 500 milligrams. So, of course, I did 4 instead of 2 because you need 1,000 or 2,000 milligrams. And then hydrogen peroxide, also cornstarch, and that's my dryer, sorry. I did not have distilled water on hand, but I do have purified water, so I went ahead and used that. Okay. So let's get into measurements. So for solution A, of course, like I said before, we need 2,000 milligrams, so I'm going to use 4 of our 500 milligram vitamin C tablets, and we're going to crush those. I used a mortar and pestle to crush those down and to get as much of that powder that we could, because a lot of it is insoluble, so we wanted to get it really mixed in the water solution. So for that one, we would need 60 milliliters of purified water to dissolve it in, and then 500 milliliters later to complete the solution. And then I went ahead and cut the solution in half for the iodine because it's exactly half of the percent. So maybe that would have something to do with it, I'm not sure. He said as you go lower, you increase, so I assumed as you go higher in concentration, you decrease. And then for solution B, I did a half a teaspoon of cornstarch, 300 milliliters of purified water, and 150 milliliters of hydrogen peroxide. So for solution A, which is already completed in this glass, I powderized the tablets of vitamin C, I dissolved it in 60 milliliters of purified water, and then I stirred it together for just a little bit until it would, kind of come together. And of course there were those insoluble bits that were left at the bottom. I went ahead and filtered those out until it was clear, which took just a few minutes. And then I immediately added the iodine, which completely turned a clear solution as soon as it dropped in there. So that did mean that I did have enough vitamin C in there, which is awesome. And what's happening during that colorless reaction that begins to form by adding the iodine to the vitamin C tablets, it kind of creates, the vitamin C converts iodine, which is I2, into iodide, which is I-, which is pretty cool. So then for solution B, I mixed, which is what this looks like. It's a little bit congealed and weird now, which is crazy after all that time that it's been sitting. I mixed half a teaspoon of cornstarch in 300 milliliters of purified water, and then I heated it to boiling. I don't have a microwave, so I used my stovetop in just a regular pot. So I heated it to boiling to dissolve it further and create that colorless reaction. I did, again, use a filter to filter it out, and then I added 150 milliliters of hydrogen peroxide. So that's kind of what this looks like after a couple of minutes sitting, because I did just do that entire presentation and didn't record my actual face or me doing it. So I'm kind of trying to go back through and do this again. So I mixed an equal amount of those solutions together, and then I mixed this solution, which is solution B, and I mixed solution A, equal parts, so 100 milliliters of each into this, and I've been stirring it for a while, and I'm going to go ahead and say that it's probably not going to do what we want. We're hoping that it would, after a couple of minutes of mixing, that it would come this really cool blue color, and we would actually get that iodine clock reaction. But unfortunately that did not happen. So what is actually happening during this reaction is that two reactions are occurring, and they're competing with each other. They're pushing and pulling back and forth. So hydrogen peroxide from solution B wants to oxidize the I negative or I minus back to colored I2, but the absorbic acid or the vitamin C wants to reduce it from I2 back to I1. So it's basically kind of like a battle for who gets what. So that was really cool to think about. And then eventually the excess hydrogen peroxide would or should take over the vitamin C, so that I2 then starts to accumulate, forming trioxide complexes that also complexes with the starch, which is what this congealed situation is in solution B. And the hope is that it would have turned blue. So timing is super important here, and I'm going to go ahead and speculate on a couple different reasons as to why this didn't happen for me. I want to say probably number one, I didn't have the correct measurement or the correct solution of iodine. I want to say that's like the most important part. Obviously, it's the iodine clock reaction, so I want to say that that's probably the reason. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that I didn't have distilled water and I used purified instead, because it did say in the video that we were following for these instructions that maybe using tap water could have like a weird negative effect on it and wouldn't work the same way. So I did use purified water, but maybe that's part of the reason. So I'm not sure. That's the only thing I can really speculate on as to why it wouldn't have worked. So yeah, I'm not quite sure. But then another thing, timing is super dependent upon, obviously, concentration and temperature. So what happened here was the more I minus or hydrogen peroxide, it would be the less time, or the increase in temperature. So both of those would have an effect on mixing this. It would basically almost immediately, or at least less time, just turn straight up blue. Of course, mine did not, but we'll pretend that it did. And then, of course, if you have more vitamin C, or a decrease in temperature, which I didn't. I pretty much followed the video to a T. I boiled the water, I immediately put everything in, I filtered everything, I added the hydrogen peroxide just like they did in the video. So I definitely think that it might have something to do with my iodine or my water. So there was no decrease in temperature, which would make it take longer, but I think it's just not going to happen. And also more vitamin C. So those are some pretty interesting facts on what's going on with this solution. Obviously, like I said, I think that I may have screwed up on some things, but it was a really cool reaction and a really cool experiment. So thank you so much for watching.